Thank you so much for taking the time to talk today.
No problem.
So I'm here talking with Michael Wandmacher, who recently composed the score for the newest Twisted Metal game, which I have played when I was, 12 years old, sleepover, so back in the day. So,
right.
And so you composed the newest one. But just kind of overall, about you, how did you get into music, and what led you to film composing?
I started out doing mainly advertising music. I was still living in Minneapolis at the time, and had worked for a company there just doing commercials pretty much exclusively, and then did a couple short films for some people who were doing those projects in Minneapolis at the time, and then a couple of independent features came up and did those. And during that time, I was traveling back and forth to Los Angeles, and along the way met some people who were really generous about handing out my music to some people here now in Los Angeles. The main person being Daniel Schweiger, who's a music editor here, works with a lot of different people, and that led to some jobs with Miramax on this Jackie Chan rehashes that they were doing in the early 2000s, and it just kind of blossomed from there. That got me an agent and some work with some different studios, and it's been a pretty diverse run from that point on. I've kind of covered all the bases, done some TV, some commercials, some video games, some movies, trailers, whatever else needs music, that kind of thing.
And I think you're for Twisted Metal. I think your style is a perfect fit, kind of based off of your recent kind of grindhouse type scores for like Piranha and Drive Angry. And how'd you get involved with the project?
I got a call probably, it was a few months ago. Pete Scaturo, the music supervisor at Sony, who was working on the project, they were finishing up the game, and we had known each other for a while, and my involvement came in doing the cinematic scenes for the game, all the cut scenes, and coming up with thematic elements for all the characters. There were actually a number of composers. At the end of the day, there's a number of people who are involved in making the music, and mine was to bring life to all the cinematics that are in between the levels or at the end of levels, or telling the story of what's going on in the game. And it was something where he had come back to me, he had heard my music and I thought I would be a good fit for doing something like that, and that's the point that I got involved. The game was already pretty well along in terms of gameplay and game mechanics, and they were just starting the cinematic process, and that's where I became involved.
So you didn't do any of the in-game music?
No, none of the in-game music. Just the cinematics and the themes for the characters. Those were. It's actually, in terms of minutes, it's the bulk of the music in the game. But the actual gameplay is a mixture of some other composers and the bands that were licensed for use in the game.
Okay, right,
so
right.
It's kind of a collective. A lot of games are done that way now because especially a game like Twisted Metal, where licensed songs by different bands is something that's very heavily involved in making the game, in marketing the game, that kind of thing. You end up with a group of people working on it. I was just the person who, during the most kind of visual parts of the game, the storytelling parts of the game, came in to score that.
Right, and going back to Piranha and Drive Angry, which I love your scores for those. I think they're just balls to the wall, kick ass, really fun scores. And
Thanks.
And so did you apply that kind of mentality and that style to Twisted Metal?
Definitely. It was important to give each of the characters, the main characters, a very distinct style. And especially in the case of Sweet Tooth, who's the most iconic character. He's kind of this, steroided out, overly muscled dude, serial killer, maniac dude who wears a clown mask. And anybody who plays the game knows who he is. And he's even beefier this time around and more wacky and psychotic. And I definitely took the approach of trying to do a mashup of aleatoric orchestral music, heavy metal, speed metal, industrial music, and I guess almost you could consider it sound design, and mashing that all together into one piece of music. And there are times when it's almost like noise, because it's like you're hearing what's in his head. And then there's other times where it's very heavy, for lack of a better word, it's metal, and in the most metal of senses, because it works for his character. In the case of Mr. Grimm, it's a much more kind of biker, out on the, riding the back roads kind of feel. It's similar to Drive Angry in that respect, where it's very guitar driven.
Right.
It has a bit of a hint of sadness in it, because his character is more of he's just a rundown kind of melancholy dude who's trying to find some sort of redemption. And then Dollface, the female character, is, I think she's actually the most twisted of all when you really look at her and how her character came to be. But she's like the ultimate narcissist, and her theme is this like little girl singing. It's almost like a lullaby, except it's run through all these distortions and tremolos and all this other weird stuff to throw it. So it sounds way, way off, but still has this kind of girly aspect to it at the same time. It's twisted. I don't know any other way to say it. It's the same for Calypso, the guy who's running the whole show. His music is much more traditional in the sense that it's your choirs from hell, satanic ish, that kind of thing. It's very big, or it's you hear the pipe organs and the choirs and the orchestra and that kind of thing. And he lives up in the big tower, and that comes back too. And it was my task to just give each person in the game some kind of identity musically, when the gameplay itself wasn't going on.
Right. And were you ever because it is a loud game, and the music is very loud, were you ever concerned of doing too much musically, or did you ever have to pull yourself back and say maybe this is too much noise or too much distortion, or did you how did you craft the music to make it, I guess, tangible in a way?
In the case of these characters, it was never there was really never a point where it was too much, just because of the style of how the game is put together. Everything about it is in your face, and it's hard to do anything that's too over the top. The only time I really pulled back was with Dollface. Her character is much more, for lack of a better word, the music is kind of snotty. There's a bratty element to it where it has more of a there's that kind of thing in it, and I pulled back on that to make it to have more almost a childish aspect to it, because she's just the ultimate narcissist. She's so into herself, and she thinks she's so perfect.
Right.
But as for the rest of it, it was all just
to hell
really
with it.
it was really gnarly and aggressive and big, and it had to match the intensity of the game, which is the same thing. It's really, once you're in, you really feel like you're on a roller coaster ride.
And
go ahead.
You mentioned that because you came in a little bit later in the process, and so was there already the gameplay music, was that already done, and this licensed music was already set, and did you work off of that at all? Did you try to match that soundscape, or were you just concerned on doing the cinematics?
No, there was the gameplay music, I think, was already well in process, and the licensing always has to be in process early on, because it takes time to get things cleared. But I never really heard anything else. There was a theme written for a little riff written for Sweet Tooth that I integrated into some of the music that Sony owned and wanted implemented in some of his stuff. So I used that in a couple of spots, and there was what am I trying to think of? general style of the game had, they could intimate it to me and tell me what it was like, but I didn't really hear anything else, so I just had to kind of riff off what I was seeing and visuals. And the first visuals that I got were very raw. They were almost all green screen stuff, and you're just seeing actors literally moving in front of a green screen. None of the CGI was done, none of it had been painted, none of it had been lit. And as time went by, I would see it progressively more refined, and I would tweak the music given there were some visuals or timing things that I had to fix as time went along. But a lot of it at first was just establishing a tone for the particular character and hitting some certain things that I could see or hit some certain timings. And then as I could see more and more things visually, I would either take away elements that didn't seem appropriate or add something in that would intensify a moment.
And sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It was a process of just, and there was no real, I wouldn't say trial and error. It was more like getting it done and then waiting to see what the next pass was going to be and see what needed to be added or removed. In the case of Sweet Tooth, everything is cut very hard. Like you'll see movements or changes in perspective, and the music hard cuts on those edits to the point where it doesn't even musically make sense. But that was intentional. Whereas the theme for Mr. Grimm is very much it's a melodic thing on the guitar that plays as a complete thought, as is the theme for Dollface. But I wanted Sweet Tooth to be very jarring and very aggressive and very distorted and very harsh. And you might even get an idea going, but if the cut visually changed, the music just changed with it on a dime, like it completely go somewhere else. And that was the intention, and it worked for that character.
Yeah.
It's really, the finished product is really cool. It's weird, it's scary, it's heavy, and it ended up, I'm really happy with the end result.
Because it does feel, your other scores, they have kind of a fun quality to it, but I did notice, well, this does too, but I feel like you took it more seriously too at certain parts, so it didn't feel just like a kind of a riff or anything, but it did feel it had weight to it.
Yeah, these were, thanks for that too. It was more serious in the sense that these characters were, the tone of the game, there is no humor in it, even though you see these guys running, especially in the case, again, of Sweet Tooth or even Dollface, who's wearing a mask. They'll, with the whole clown mask thing and the fact that he's driving the ice cream truck, and I wrote that little ice cream truck music thing, the little theme that plays while he's driving the ice cream truck, but even that is completely detuned and sounds like it's been played 3 million times, and the tape or whatever is playing is completely falling apart.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. These people are serious about wanting to achieve their goals, and they're willing to commit any act of violence or the most heinous thing you can think of in order to achieve their goals. So there wasn't really any humor to act on in that case. There's some satire, maybe there's some irony, but there wasn't any humor to pull out of it.
Right.
I can't say anything about the game or the ultimate outcome of what befalls on these characters if they win, but there's definitely elements in there that people would call ironic, but this was much more serious.
No, yeah, it's a dark game. At least the last one was pretty dark too.
Yeah, it's very dark. And even in the visual style, when it was finished, I was really captivated by just the way they did it, the way they lit it and painted all the scenes, the cut scenes and everything. It has a very specific look. It does not look like anything I've ever seen. It's kind of like, I can't even compare it to anything. It all looks like a moving painting. It's really cool, but dark. And that was, one of the marching orders from the get-go, was dark. It's
Yeah.
dark.
I mean, I have it pre-ordered. It should be on my doorstep tomorrow morning, so I can't wait to play it.
Cool. No, it's cool. It's the gameplay is insane, as it should be, and the story's really cool. But I think that in terms of bringing a franchise back, they really hit a home run. It's everything looks awesome. The gameplay mechanics are very fine-tuned. The story is logical. It makes sense. The goals are logical and make sense, and it's really satisfying for people who want that style of gameplay. It's a very satisfying experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask here. I know it doesn't affect your music, but Twisted Metal was kind of known for being able for players to, use their own music while they're doing online or the regular gameplay. And
Mm-hmm.
and I read somewhere that they're bringing that feature to this game. What's your take on that? Do you think that players should be able to, play whatever they want? Do you think that it masks over the original composer's music? Do you think it adds more, I guess, flexibility or replay value?
I think for replay value, it's definitely. I think it's a cool thing. I mean, I play Warcraft with other music going on.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it makes it better. Sometimes I just turn it off. It's the cinematic things. I think you should see it with the way it's intended to be scored at least once. Most people only watch cinematics once anyway, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the gameplay, I could see where people would want to maybe change up the what they're listening to change up the experience. And more than anything, I think it just has to do with getting more value out of the game and being able to play it more, replay the game, and it just builds more loyalty to the franchise.
Right.
Anything that has to do with modding or customization, people love that. So I can understand that. It doesn't, as an artist, it doesn't, insult me or anything like that. They're the ones paying for the game. They should be able to make the experience what they want it to be.
No, yeah, I think it's a cool feature, and yeah, it does add, I guess, longevity to, like, if you're playing, which, I mean, I love multiplayer games, and certain games, they have such distinct little bits of music, but when you're playing hours upon hours upon hours and you hear it over and over again, sometimes it can drive you a little crazy.
Oh, absolutely. And it's really hard. I tell people composing game music is extraordinarily difficult in-game at times because you can't think in a thematic sense in-game, because if the same violin part or the same French horn line or the same guitar line keeps coming back every 2.5 minutes,
Yeah.
you're going to drive the player absolutely nuts. And I know that because I'm a hardcore gamer, and you have to think in a different way. It's great to have a great theme that you can come back to, but you don't want to come back to it too much.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, people are just going to shut the music off.
Yeah.
And that's the worst possible world.
Yeah,
So, as a composer, but I understand what you're saying. As a gamer, I completely understand.
Well, there was nothing about, I didn't feel any repetition or repetitiveness in your music. Every track, while it had the same soundscape and same sound design, it had different pieces and different textures that, I guess, for each character, made them stand out individually.
Oh, cool. Thanks. For me, it was a lot of fun because there really were no boundaries. It was try to make it weird, but not, don't walk down roads that other people have walked down.
Right.
And for me, I don't see that as intimidating. I see that as fun because it opens up a whole bunch of doors to, I don't know how this is going to turn out. So I just start banging on things, playing guitars and drums and putting instruments on the floor and banging on them with sticks and stuff like that, and just seeing what happens, or manipulating samples, or shouting into microphones and distorting it and playing it backwards and chopping it all up and things like that. It's just that for me is fun. It's all part of the creative process.
Right. Well, to close up, I always like to ask composers. If you had the chance to score any film ever made with no disrespect to the original composer, which film would you choose?
Whew, boy, that's a hard one. Because it's kind of like a Zeppelin album. The ones that I really like, you don't want to touch it. Or a Pink Floyd record, it's like they got it right the first time.
But if you wanted to take a chance, just something that you would love to try at.
Wow. I've never even thought of it that way. It would have to be some kind of epic sci-fi something or other.
Yeah.
Something big, but I don't know, like it's one of the Lord of the Rings films or something like that. I've always wanted to do a sword and sorcery film. I've always wanted to do actually something big and sweeping and dramatic and completely orchestral. It's hard. The more games and things I do like this, that people don't realize that I've actually worked with a lot of orchestras and things like that, and I would love to do a completely acoustic, classic kind of Hollywood score. But as for a specific film, boy, I don't know. You got me on that one.
It's a tough question.
It's a very tough question. I'm thinking of the superhero movies too, and I don't know. I would really you'd have to get back to me on that one. I hate to sound like a politician, but I'd really have to think about it.
I interviewed Cliff Eidelman last week and he literally said, I need to think about this, and it was just silence for about 2.5 minutes.
It's hard. I mean, it's like you want to say Star Wars, and then you realize, well, no, Star Wars was just right the way it was.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Don't touch it. Boy, I can't think of one. Because all the ones that were so influential to me growing up and the scores that I really love were just right the way they were. Mm-hmm. These titles are popping through my head, but then I think, well, that's why I liked it, because they got it right.
Right.
I don't know what I could do to improve upon the things that I'm thinking of. So.
Okay, fair enough. But that's all I have for you right now. But thank you so much, Michael, for your time. And
no problem.
Hopefully we'll do it again sometime in the future.
Yeah, that'd be great.